The darkest punishments in human history. The air is thick with the scent of damp stone and fear. Somewhere in the distance, a crowd murmurs, their voices a mix of curiosity, dread, and morbid excitement. You stand at the edge of history, a silent observer, as the past unveils its most horrifying punishments, acts of cruelty that reveal the depths of human imagination when justice turns to vengeance. These are not mere stories. They are scars on the timeline of humanity, etched in blood, screams, and the desperate pleas of the condemned. Step back in time with me as we explore the top 10 most horrifying punishments inflicted upon individuals, each a chilling reminder of what happens when mercy is forgotten. 1. Flaying, the art of skinning alive. The sun beats down on an ancient Mesopotamian square, circa 800 BC. Dust swirls as a crowd gathers around a wooden frame, where a man is bound, his eyes wide with terror. The executioner, a grim figure with a sharpened blade, approaches. This is flaying, the gruesome act of removing a person's skin while they are still alive. Flaying was a favored punishment in ancient civilizations like Assyria, Persia, and medieval Europe, reserved for traitors, rebels, or those who defied the divine order. The process was meticulous, almost surgical. The executioner would begin at the extremities, peeling back the skin in strips, ensuring the victim remained conscious for as long as possible. The pain was unimaginable, every nerve exposed, every movement agony. Historical records, like those from the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal, boast of flaying enemies as a warning, their skins displayed on city walls. Imagine the victim's screams, the crowd's uneasy silence, and the executioner's cold focus. Flaying wasn't just punishment, it was a spectacle meant to terrify. In some cultures, the skin was preserved, stuffed, or hung as a trophy. The psychological horror, for both the victim and onlookers, was as potent as the physical torment. Why did humanity devise such a method? Perhaps it was to strip away not just flesh but identity, reducing a person to a raw, quivering mass. 2. Crucifixion, a slow death on the cross. Shift to Judea, 33 C. The hill of Golgotha looms under a darkening sky. 3 figures hang on wooden crosses, their bodies sagging under their own weight. Crucifixion, perfected by the Romans, was a punishment designed for maximum suffering and public humiliation. Victims were nailed or tied to a cross, their arms outstretched, their legs bent to prolong the agony. Death came slowly, sometimes over days, through suffocation, dehydration, or exhaustion. The body's weight made breathing a struggle. Each gasp required pushing up against the nails or ropes, tearing flesh anew. Roman historian Tacitus described crucifixion as a most cruel and disgusting penalty, reserved for slaves, rebels, and non-citizens. The psychological toll was immense. Victims were stripped naked, exposed to jeering crowds, and left to die in plain view. Jesus of Nazareth's crucifixion, documented in the Gospels, is the most famous example, but thousands suffered this fate across the Roman Empire. The cross became a symbol of terror, a warning to dissenters. Yet, in a twist of history, it also became a symbol of redemption for millions. How does a tool of torture transform into a beacon of hope? The answer lies in the stories we tell. 3. The brazen bull, roasted alive. Now, travel to ancient Greece, 6th century BC, to the court of Phalaris, tyrant of Acragas. A bronze statue of a bull stands in the courtyard, hollow and gleaming. Beneath it, a fire is lit. This is the brazen bull, a device so horrific it blurs the line between ingenuity and madness. Designed by the craftsman Paralaus, the brazen bull was a hollow bronze sculpture with a door on its side. The victim was locked inside, and a fire was set beneath, slowly roasting them alive. A system of tubes within the bull's head turned their screams into eerie, bull-like bellows, entertaining the onlookers. Ancient sources, like Diodorus Siculus, claimed Phalaris tested the device on Paralaus himself, appalled by its cruelty yet eager to use it. The victim's experience was a descent into hell, searing heat, suffocating smoke, and the knowledge that their screams were a perverse performance. The brazen bull was rare, but its legend persisted, a testament to humanity's capacity to blend art with atrocity. What drove Flaying to commission such a device? Was it power, fear, or a twisted desire for spectacle? 4. Scaphism, death by insects. We move to ancient Persia, 5th century BC, under a merciless sun. A man is trapped between two boats, his body slathered with honey and milk. This is Scaphism, or the boats, a punishment so grotesque it defies comprehension. The victim was placed in a narrow boat, with another boat secured on top, leaving only their head, hands, and feet exposed. They were force-fed a mixture of milk and honey, which was also smeared on their body to attract insects. Left in a swamp or stagnant water, the victim endured as flies, wasps, and other creatures burrowed into their flesh, laying eggs that hatched into maggots. Death came slowly, often from sepsis, dehydration, or starvation, sometimes taking weeks. Greek historian Plutarch recounts the fate of Mithridates, a Persian soldier executed this way for killing Cyrus the Younger. The punishment was reserved for the worst offenders, its horror lying in its prolonged, dehumanizing nature. Scaphism turned the body into a living ecosystem of decay, a punishment that weaponized nature itself. How could a society justify such cruelty? Perhaps it was the ultimate assertion of control over life and death. 5. The breaking wheel, shattered bones. Fast forward to medieval Europe, 14th century. A crowd gathers in a town square, where a wooden wheel stands upright. A man is bound to it, his limbs splayed. The executioner raises a heavy iron bar. This is the breaking wheel, a punishment as brutal as it is symbolic. The victim's limbs were tied to the wheel, and the executioner used a club or iron bar to shatter their bones, starting with the legs and moving upward. Each strike was calculated to maximize pain without immediately killing. In some cases, the victim was left on the wheel to die of exposure or shock. In others, they were finished, with a coup de grace. French records from the Middle Ages describe the wheel as a common punishment for murderers and highwaymen. The breaking wheel was a public spectacle, meant to deter crime and assert authority. The victim's broken body, often braided through the wheel's spokes, was displayed as a warning. The physical agony was matched by the humiliation of being reduced to a shattered husk before a jeering crowd. Why did societies cling to such displays of violence? Was it justice, or a reflection of their own fears? 6. Ling Qi, death by 1,000 cuts. We journey to China, under the Qing dynasty, 19th century. A man is tied to a wooden post in a bustling marketplace. A skilled executioner wields a knife, making precise cuts. This is Ling Qi, or death by 1,000 cuts, a punishment as methodical as it is horrifying. Ling Qi involves slicing small pieces of flesh from the victim's body, prolonging their suffering over hours or even days. The executioner was trained to avoid vital organs, ensuring the victim remained alive and conscious for as long as possible. Historical photographs from the late 19th century, taken by Western observers, capture the grim reality of Ling Qi, used for crimes like treason or parricide. The punishment was not just physical but cultural, rooted in Confucian ideas of disgrace and the destruction of the body as a spiritual violation. The victim's slow dismemberment was a public ritual, meant to restore social order by erasing the offender's existence. Ling Qi was abolished in 1905, but its legacy lingers in images and accounts that haunt modern sensibilities. What does it say about a society that turns execution into an art form? 7. Impalement pierced through. Now, we stand in 15th century Wallachia, under the rule of Vlad the Impaler. A forest of stakes rises from the ground, each bearing a writhing figure. Impalement, one of history's most visceral punishments, was Vlad's signature. The victim was pierced through the body with a sharpened stake, often through the rectum or vagina, and hoisted upright. The stake was carefully positioned to avoid immediate death, allowing the victim to linger in agony for hours or days. Ottoman chroniclers described Vlad's forest of the impaled, where thousands of enemies and criminals met this fate, their bodies a terrifying deterrent. Impalement was not unique to Vlad. It was used in ancient Assyria, medieval Europe, and the Ottoman Empire. The punishment's horror lay in its simplicity and visibility. Passers-by could not ignore the grotesque display. Vlad's use of impalement earned him the moniker Dracula, inspiring legends of vampiric cruelty. Was this punishment a calculated act of terror, or the product of a mind consumed by power? 8. Boiling alive, a cauldron of death. In 16th century England, a large cauldron simmers in a courtyard. A man is bound, his fate sealed by royal decree. Boiling alive, though rare, was a punishment that left an indelible mark on history. Victims were submerged in boiling water, oil, or tar, often after being convicted of crimes like poisoning or counterfeiting. In England, the 1531 Act for Poisoning mandated boiling for poisoners, as seen in the case of Richard Roos, who was boiled alive for attempting to poison his master. The process was swift but excruciating, with burns destroying tissue and organs failing under the heat. Boiling was less common than other punishments, but its sheer brutality made it unforgettable. The spectacle of a human body disintegrating in a cauldron shocked even hardened onlookers. Was boiling a punishment born of moral outrage, or a desperate attempt to match the crime's perceived evil? 9. The rack stretched to breaking. In a dank dungeon in medieval Europe, a prisoner lies on a wooden frame, wrists and ankles bound to rollers. The rack, a device of torture and execution, is about to do its work. The rack stretched the victim's body, dislocating joints and tearing muscles and ligaments. Each turn of the rollers increased the agony, often accompanied by interrogations to extract confessions. Used widely during the Inquisition and in Tudor England, the rack was both a punishment and a tool of coercion. Victims who survived were often permanently disabled. The rack's horror was its precision. It could inflict unimaginable pain without spilling blood, appealing to authorities who sought clean torture. The psychological torment of anticipating each turn of the wheel was as brutal as the physical pain. Why did societies rely on such devices? Was it to uncover truth, or to break the spirit? 10. The gibbet, caged and forgotten. Finally, we arrive in 18th century England, where a metal cage swings from a gallows by the roadside. Inside is a man, alive or dead, exposed to the elements. This is the gibbet, a punishment that combined execution with posthumous humiliation. Victims were hanged or locked alive in a cage and left to die of starvation, thirst, or exposure. The body was then displayed, sometimes for years, as a warning to others. Pirates and highwaymen, like Captain Kidd, were often gibbeted, their decaying corpses a grim reminder of justice's reach. The gibbet's horror lay in its dehumanization, reducing a person to a spectacle, stripped of dignity even in death. Travelers passing by would see the cage swaying in the wind, a symbol of society's vengeance. What drove such public displays? Was it deterrence, or a need to assert control over chaos? Reflection: the shadows of justice. As we step back from these scenes, the weight of history presses down. These punishments, flaying, crucifixion, the brazen bull, scaphism, the breaking wheel, lynching, impalement, boiling, the rack, and the gibbet, reveal a paradox. Humanity's capacity for creativity is matched by its capacity for cruelty. Each method was designed not just to punish but to terrify, to assert power, to erase. Yet, they also reflect the fears and values of their times, fear of rebellion, betrayal, or divine wrath. Why do we recoil from these stories? Perhaps because they hold a mirror to our own potential for darkness. Today, we condemn such punishments as barbaric, yet modern debates over justice, capital punishment, solitary confinement, echo the same questions: what is justice? When does it become vengeance? As we leave the past behind, we carry its lessons forward, hoping to temper power with mercy.